just a moment. I think we're having some technical difficulties. Great. All right. Hello, everybody, and thank you for your patience. I think we had one quick technical difficulty, and I think we are on track now. So forgive me if you're hearing this for a second time, but my name is Hillary Harding, and I am the Development Director for the Outdoor Industry Women's Coalition, and I wanted to start today by, good, I just got the thumbs up that we are up and rolling. So that's perfect. I want to give a big thank you to Leisure Trends Group. Leisure Trends has been a supporter of the OIWC for many years now. And because of their support and generosity, OIWC has really been able to raise the caliber of offerings because of Leisure Trends' data and surveys and ability to help us with research and webinars such as this. I specifically want to thank Charlie Cooper, Julia Day, Dr. Jennifer Bouldry, Liz Trahura, and today's senior analyst, Tom Jones. All right. The mission of the OIWC is advocacy, education, and resources for women in the outdoor bike and snow industries. Our vision is respect, inclusion, and gender equality at every level in the workplace. We currently have 1,700 individual women and men, and we represent and work with 95 different companies. If you're already a member of the OIWC, either as an individual or as a company, thank you. And in a minute or two, I'm going to talk a little bit about ways you can engage with OIWC over the next couple months. I'd also like to say if you're not a member with us, now is a great time to join. As an individual member, you're going to be able to access our professional development, our networking, our online career resources. We have volunteer opportunities. We do events at the trade shows, and we're doing more and more webinars over the next couple years. Sorry, I'm going to go back one slide. We also do some recognition of women in the outdoor bike and snow and run. In fact, our nominations are now open for Interbike. So anyone on this call who knows a deserving woman who is either a pioneer in the bike industry or someone new to the bike industry who shows a lot of potential, we request that you go on to oiwc.org award nomination and enter her name and the reasons why you think she should win an award from us today. For folks who are on this call who are already members, these are some of our social media platforms that we would love to get your ideas, your questions, your comments, or your insights. Any of these ways you can find us and let us know what you are thinking and what you need from us as an organization. Finally, here's some places we're going to be in the next couple months in person. We're going to be at the Outdoor Retailer Summer Show in Salt Lake City later this month. We're going to be at Interbike in Las Vegas. We'll also be at Rendezvous, which is in San Diego this year. We're also going to have webinars coming in October as well as more regional events. And you can find all of the information on where we're going to be on oiwc.org, and we update that regularly. So we really invite you to come and check out our site and find something that works for you. I'm now going to turn it over to Tom Jones, the Senior Retail Analyst here at Leisure Trends. Both his contact information and mine will be found at the end of this presentation if you're interested in contacting one of us. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Tom, who's going to present on women's retail sales in the outdoor run, snow sports, and cycling industries. Tom, thank you so much for doing this for us today.
Okay, thank you very much, Hillary, for that introduction, and sorry for the little delay there while we had to manually hand over the audio equipment here, but I think we're all set and ready to go. It's a real honor to be doing this webinar today on behalf of OIWC and Leisure Trends Group. Here at Leisure Trends, we really do appreciate the partnership that we've had over the years with the OIWC, and we certainly look forward to continuing to nurture that as time goes on. A couple of things really quickly about myself before we dive into the numbers today. I am working my dream job here at Leisure Trends. I've been here for a little bit over a year. Before that, I was in consulting with specialty retailers in the outdoor industry. And then before that, My family owned an outdoor retail business in Summit County, Colorado, and for about 12 years, I took that over as the owner of that business. And during that time, I was able to use Leisure Trends as a retailer and really discover how wonderful the data mining opportunities are with Leisure Trends, and sort of set my sights on this company. And a couple of years later, here I am. So it's great to be here. I would like to welcome everyone to the webinar today. We're going to be looking at women-specific business in 4 of the industries that we track. Just like Hillary said, outdoor, running, bike, and snow sports. And we'll do a little bit of PowerPoint, and then we're going to dive into the Leisure Trends proprietary dynamic reporting to look at recent trends. A little bit of housekeeping before we get going. We are recording this webinar, so you'll receive an email at some point after the webinar with a link to that recording. The slides will be available, and if you're interested, please just send me an email. You will see my email address at the end of the show here. If you have questions as I'm going along today, please type them into the box on your GoToWebinar screen, and then Hillary and I will get to as many of those as possible at the end of the presentation. So you can certainly ask questions about the OIWC for Hillary to answer, or anything with respect to the data or Leisure Trends that I will address. I need to remind you that the information in the webinar today is privileged and confidential and should not be shared outside your company. Additionally, if you would like to use any of the information in advertising, please contact us first for approval. And I am just going to leave that up for about 10 more seconds so that you can fully digest it. Hopefully this is the least interesting part of the webinar today. Okay, a little bit about Leisure Trends. We are a Boulder, Colorado-based market research and consulting firm. We specialize in understanding what Americans do in their free time, and we take a 360-degree approach to do that. We have 3 distinct but interrelated divisions that provide intelligence on all of the industries that we track. The first one is the Retail Track division. That is where I work in the analytics department. And it's here where we show you what is selling at retail, how many, for how much, all the way down to the brand and model level. Then we have consumer research, which gets to the why of the purchasing equation. This is a fully dedicated research division within our company, and they can do anything from brand equity studies to segmentation and conjoint, consumer attitudes, motivations of any size across a global scope. So we have a really fun and interesting consumer research department here, and they are highly motivated and qualified to answer a variety of questions. And then we also have this very sophisticated customer relationship marketing division. And this is where we get the answers to the how and the who questions. What's the best way to manage your customer information? When should you contact your customers? And whom? And how often? And so on. So with those 3 divisions, we cover every aspect of the forces that drive business at retail. Okay, so for today's agenda, we'll start by looking at an overview of sales and the share of women's product in those 4 industries that we mentioned earlier: outdoor, run, bike, and snow. We'll look at specific categories across all 4 industries. And then we'll go into the Leisure Trends dynamic reporting to assess what's happening right now year to date and see where the growth opportunities are. And then we're going to find within that there are some challenges that these industries need to confront and be aware of. And then finally at the very end, I'll open it up to questions as we mentioned. Okay, so I want to start off by looking at the economic context of what's going on in the businesses that we're going to look at today. And this is a chart that blends the national economy with what we're seeing in our specific industries. We have the years across the bottom down here, and we're going back to 2007 so that we can kind of get the idea of what happened when the recession hit and how we are doing coming out of that. So first I'm going to draw in this Consumer Confidence Present Situation Index. And this is a monthly survey of how consumers in the U.S. are feeling about their immediate prospects. So it's a great measure of how the economy is doing in general. And obviously you can see that this number just completely tanked as the recession progressed. Next, let's bring in national sporting goods. And this is an index that tells you whether business is contracting or growing. And again, you can see the effect of the recession on this. This dotted line across here is sort of the bare minimum of where you want these indexes to be to keep them in positive growth territory with respect to inflation. So the dotted line is relevant for these next three indices that I'm going to show you. It doesn't really relate to the consumer confidence line there. So the way the Census Bureau tracks sporting goods, this line that I just drew in includes everything that we're talking about today, plus basketballs, golf clubs, volleyball nets, and so on. So it's a very broad measure of growth in spending on sports equipment and clothing. So now let's draw in the specific index for outdoor business. And this is based on Leisure Trends data. This is total outdoor, so it includes women's business as well as men's and gender neutral. You can see that it outperformed general sporting goods when times were good, and it felt the pain just a little bit more down here when things went south. And that's generally what we see with the specialty industries that we track. Outdoor will definitely magnify what's going on in the general economy for the most part. And then you can see that outdoor also grew out of the recession faster. It kind of hit this healthy line 4 or 5 months sooner than general sporting goods did. And then finally, here's the same index based on Leisure Trends data, but for the women's specific outdoor business. And in general, going quite a ways back, you can see that growth has been significantly higher for women's product than for the outdoor industry in general. And that was the case coming into the recession, and it is certainly the case coming out of the recession. Things have slowed a little bit in the last 6 to 8 months, but we are seeing these little attempts at upticks in growth, and so we're relatively optimistic for business going forward. We've had a few hiccups in the last 18 months or so with funny weather patterns and so on. Warm weather industries year to date this year are up against a stellar early start to spring last year, so some of that is now kind of shaking out, and we're starting to see things recover somewhat. Okay, so why is this important in the first place, and why do we want to focus on women's business? From a sheer economic point of view, women are increasingly making the purchasing decisions for their families and significant others, and that's where this 80% figure comes in. According to at least one study, and actually several that I've seen, more than 80% of all consumer spending in the U.S. is controlled by women. 80%. That's a huge number. And then we see similar statistics for purchasing of sports apparel as well. So women have a huge influence on spending patterns at retail. Let's look at how spending on women-specific product has changed over the last decade. So what we have here is annual sales in billions of dollars at outdoor on women's-specific product. You can see that it basically grew at a constant, healthy rate with the exception of that recession going into 2008, 2009. But that certainly is something that we saw across the entire economy. It's not by any means unique to women's outdoor business. And then coming out of the recession, business really started to grow again and climb into 2012. Okay, now let's look at the share of total outdoor business represented by women-specific products. You can see that back in the early 2000s we were under 20%. If we took this even further back, you'd see this number dwindle down into the low teens. And then as we got up through 2007, we had significant growth in share of women's product. And now that has sort of leveled off here. That is not necessarily a bad thing, having this leveling in share. Certainly total dollars continued to grow, but what this tells us is that men's and gender-neutral products grew at about the same rate as women's product. So we still do have decent growth in total sales, but the share has kind of stagnated right around this level. Now we're looking at women's specific product in these shares, and that includes equipment and equipment accessories, which are mostly gender neutral, so that's going to depress these levels a little bit. If we looked at just apparel or just footwear, both of those categories are represented by 41% of women's business. 41% of the total is women's business in apparel and footwear. So I think that looking at this graph, we're kind of past women's product growth version 1.0, and we're moving into the next phase. I think that when the recession hit, it kind of put the brakes on significant growth here, and so we're moving into that next level. It's going to take a continued concerted effort on the part of manufacturers and retailers, and we're going to need real, authentic innovation to keep women coming back into our businesses. Okay, so let's move on to looking at women's share of business in some of the specific industries and see where the opportunities might lie. These four industries that Leisure Trends tracks together accounted for about $15 billion in total retail sales in 2012. And that's what we're looking at is sales in 2012. The purple areas represent the proportion of retail dollars spent on women's specific product, and then the green is men's and gender neutral purchasing. So we know that women's share of these purchases is actually greater than the percentages we see here because of the large number of gender neutral products. When we look at outdoor here, we are pulling cook stoves and climbing skins, tents, and so on into this green bar. So we have to keep in mind that the proportion of actual business that's going on here specific to women is larger than exactly what we're seeing right here. Okay, so understanding that, let's take a look at what these percentages actually are and the volume of dollars that they represented in 2012. The running industry is the most mature industry in terms of gender parity. That little purple section there is about 46% of total business, and it's about $400 million in spending on women-specific running product. In the snow sports industry, we're at about 34% of the total on women's product, and that represents about $1 billion. In cycling, we're looking at 14%, and this is definitely the lowest one in terms of women's penetration. obviously we have a lot of bike parts and things like that that go into this that are not going to be gender specific, but 14% is still a pretty small number when you think about the number of bikes that are sold, the amount of apparel, and so on. So we're going to be taking a closer look at that as we go through the webinar today. That business amounts to about $460 million. And then in the outdoor business, we're looking at about 29% of total business being women's specific. And again, as I mentioned, if you strip out gender neutral equipment and accessories, you end up with about 41% of purchasing being attributable to women's products. And that represents $1.8 billion. So if we total these up, just women's specific products, we're looking at $3.6 billion annually in spending. That is a significant chunk of total business that's going for women's specific items, and we know that they're making decisions about billions more in purchasing. So this is a very important part of these markets and something that we need to continue to focus on, continue to nurture and grow. Okay, just a few additional statistics from the Leisure Trends database. If we look, focusing just on the outdoor industry, if we look at the average selling price per item, and for this we're looking only at apparel, and this was over the course of 2012, men's and so-called unisex items averaged about $61 per purchase. Women's averaged about $67 per purchase. So you're looking at a difference of 10% there, 10% greater dollars coming into the retail register per item of apparel purchased at outdoor. The margins on those products were just about identical at 43%. And I should mention that, of course, this is pulling in markdowns and reductions and so on. So we know that our starting margins in apparel are at 50% or greater, and this is capturing all the markdowns that occur throughout the year. And then if we look at average annual growth over the last 4 years, and now instead of looking at just apparel, we're looking at all items. Women's growth has been about 9% per year, and men's has been at about 7.5% per year. So, very important piece of the business here, high dollar amounts per item, and significant growth. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the categories across all of these 4 industries. So we'll start with footwear. And what you're seeing here is the proportion of each of these categories that represented women's product sales in 2012. And we're still looking at dollars sold. So for instance, 20% of AT boots and 57% of outdoor casual shoes that sold were women's specific styles. So a couple of things jump out. First, cycling shoes were at 28%. Women's cycling shoes, 28% of all cycling shoes sold through independent bike dealers in 2012. For the number of women who are biking these days, this is a surprisingly low number. And again, it's going to be kind of a theme that we see with bike throughout the presentation today. We have research that shows that the proportion of recreational cyclists out there who are women is between 40 and 50%, somewhere in the mid to upper 40s most likely. So to see that this small proportion of cycling shoes is women specific is certainly an eyebrow raiser and something that we should all be paying attention to. And then I also want to call out outdoor shoes here. This is at 40%. I think there is still room for growth here. This has been a good category over the last several years, especially the component of outdoor shoes that is casual, with this tremendous percentage of total business being women's. It's close with this 40% number because I think once you're around 40 to 45%, it's hard to push the needle much further. But there certainly continues to be opportunity here, and we don't want to let that number fall below 40% as we start seeing more competition from other channels. Okay, I also want to point out something about ski boots. So if we look at all alpine ski boots sold through the snow sports industry, about 36% of those were women-specific models. And then this number is an aggregate of high-performance boots and sport and recreation ski boots. So you can see with sport and recreation that we basically have total parity. 51% of those boots were women-specific sizing and lasting. In high performance, we are looking at just 30%. So before I move off this slide, I just want to mention one thing, which is that if you are interested in snow sports specific information, that would be through the Snow Sports Industries Association, SIA, and Kelly Davis. And if you don't have that contact information, let us know and we can certainly put you in touch with SIA. So this is Leisure Trends data, but SIA controls that data in the marketplace. Okay, so continuing to talk about the alpine ski boots, I went to the individual models to see if this is just a matter of demand or if there's enough variety of product out there for women. So I looked specifically at high-performance ski boots, and in 2012, from the top 5 manufacturers only, there were 232 unique styles for men that sold through the snow sports industry. At the same time, there were 125 styles of women's boots that sold through snow sports. So we kind of have to be careful here. You know, more than 100 styles is quite a lot of variety. So it's possible that this is more of a demand thing than manufacturers not providing enough selection for women. But it's interesting to see the disparity, and certainly there are all kinds of profit and benefit profit loss calculations that go into deciding if you're going to launch a new model in a specific gender, because the company has to build all new molds and so on. But this is an interesting disparity between the numbers of actual boot models available to skiers of both genders. Moving on to apparel across industries, we have women's cycling apparel dollars at 31% of the total last year. There's likely some out-of-channel shopping that goes on here, but there is a real opportunity here for cycling apparel manufacturers to grow an important segment of what is already a very popular industry. And then the other category that I'm going to call out is outdoor base layer, which at 39% I think is fairly low when you think about base layer. And this also raises the question of out-of-channel shopping, whether outdoor is doing enough now that they have the female shopper, if they're doing enough to keep her coming back to the store. And again, there are all kinds of challenges out there that are trying to pull customers' attentions away from our core channels in these industries. Okay, so finally, let's take a look at what share of hard goods sales is women specific. And this is where we see the greatest disparities. Here's that line right around the 40 to 45% area, which is not necessarily scientific. It's more of an aspirational goal of where we'd like to be, at least in some of these categories. Every category is well below that level, obviously, except for lifestyle leisure bikes. So if we wanted to highlight some of the categories that present opportunities for growth, we pretty much have to look at all of these. Once again, I'm going to pick on the bike industry a little bit here. Mountain bike sales were 13% women's of all bikes sold last year, and road bikes were at 22%. I think that's an amazing number given the number of women who are out there on bikes, and again, that participation number is much higher than this. It's up in the 40s. So as with ski boots, I went ahead and did the exercise. As with ski boots, counted the number of individual models that sold from the top 5 manufacturers of bikes in 2012. There were just shy of 600 distinct men's models that moved through independent bike dealers. And for women's, there were 250. That's 42% of the number of men's and so-called unisex models. Now, women do purchase over here in the men's or unisex category, so the actual disparity in purchasing is not as large as we see here. But that brings up another interesting point, which is that some women report anecdotally, and I haven't seen research on this, but certainly just kind of doing my own personal research for this webinar today, talking to a variety of women. There are significant numbers of women out there who want a higher end build or component set, and it's only available on a men's bike model. So again, this boils down to an investment equation on the part of the manufacturers, but there is a lot of opportunity here to provide higher end, well kitted out bikes that appeal more specifically to women. Okay, so before we dive into the Leisure Trends dynamic reporting, I want to take a look at relative growth in these 4 industries over time. These growth rates that you see over here are compound annual growth rates, and that's essentially a yearly average of growth. So we've got, again, in outdoor, about 9% per year in women's product, and this is going back just to 2009. With the recession occurring in 2008, and with some of our tracking beginning right around 2009, I didn't want to shortchange the ones that have got a longer history here. So I'm starting this growth calculation right in 2009. And again, the red line is women's specific product. So we've seen steady growth in women's product in outdoor since the recession. And same with men's. It's a pretty healthy industry, but there are certainly opportunities within outdoor to increase women's business. Snow sports has certainly had some rough patches over the last few years. Growth for both genders has been somewhat depressed. There's not a lot of story there to talk about. But when we looked at those percentages of hard goods that are dedicated to women's product, it certainly looks like there is even more opportunity to meet that female customer in snow sports. In running, this is the strongest market for women's business and the most mature. We've seen at least 10% growth per year since 2009. And actually, before that, it was even greater, right around 15%. per year going back to 2007. Men's business is not far behind. This is a great, healthy industry that continues to grow. And then we have bike, and this is the only industry where men's business has grown faster recently than women's, and as we've been pointing out, this is where there remains a lot of opportunity to develop women's specific business. Okay, so let's let you look at some photographs of some of our Leisure Trends women in this slide as I prepare to hop over to the Leisure Trends dynamic reporting. So what we have here is what you see as a client or a retailer if you have a subscription to Leisure Trends data. This is where we have all of our dynamic interactive reporting. And I am starting with the cycling business here, looking at year-to-date business in units sold. And year-to-date right now in our database is business through May of 2013 compared to business January through May of 2012. And we will, within less than a week or a week and a half, we'll be publishing our June data. For now, we are looking at May as the most recent month. It's been a slow start to 2013 for the bike industry. It's down about 8% overall. We have to put that in a little bit of context. Last year was a stellar year due to the lack of much of a winter, and so we saw certainly spikes in business last year. Let's hop into bikes and take a look at what's happening by gender. So looking at all bikes, and year-to-date, men's units are down, excuse me, 11%. Women's are down about 6.5%. And if we translate that into dollars, the declines are a little bit less because we've had some price increases, average retail selling price increases, but we're still seeing business being down fairly significantly in the bike industry. So let's put this into that historical context and pull in the last few years. I'm going to hide 2013 since we're only partway through it. And you can see that business spiked pretty nicely last year. Overall, total bike business went from $1.4 billion to $1.5 billion. Okay, let's drill into road bikes specifically. See what's happened there. So we're still looking at dollars. Very similar story here. Nice little pop last year for both genders. And then year to date, we've got some declines. So I'll pull that in. And both of them are down between 7 and 9% when you go to the gender level. And you'll notice that men's business is about triple women's business in road bikes. Moving over to mountain bikes, we've got business down also this year, although women's business is up just a little bit, 1.5 points. That's in dollars. If we switch this over to a units view, both genders are down fairly significantly there for men's in mountain bikes. And again, let's look at the historical perspective here. So we'll go back to 2010, and I'm going to put this back on dollars. And so we can see about 10% growth in men's business and about 20% growth in women's dollars in mountain bikes going into 2012. So a really nice spike last year, which we think is primarily weather-driven given the early start to the season. Let's focus in on women's for a moment here and take a look at what's happening by wheel size. So over the last 3 years, non-2.9ers, which for women-specific bikes is almost entirely 26 inches, from 11 to 12, basically we had stagnation. Really nice growth in 2.9ers from 11 to 12. Again, just women's product. And if we look at year to date, 2.9ers, women specific, are up 89% so far this year. The 26 inchers are down 19%. So there is an incredible amount of opportunity here. This represents $9.7 million so far year to date. If we flip back to that annual view, last year there was about $60 million in business in total in mountain bikes. So there's just all kinds of opportunity for growth in this 29-inch wheel category for women. They are certainly as interested in this product as the guys are. All right, and just take a quick snapshot here of apparel, helmets, and shoes. And this is an interesting story. Year to date, women's apparel, helmets, and shoes are down 11%. That business is going somewhere. And so this is something that we really need to be focusing on, particularly at retail, in terms of ways to get those add-on sales when the women are in for a new bike. There's all kinds of opportunity here to offer them additional product that they need, not selling stuff that they don't need so that it can sit in their closet, but upgrade to a helmet, the appropriate shoes for the new kind of bike, things of that nature. And this has really been a pretty stagnant category, as you can see, over the last 3 years in women's product. We're hovering right at $95, $96 million per year, and there's relatively no growth. So something that is new and exciting and can kind of spur growth here is really what we need to find for the bike industry to keep driving that female business. Okay, so that's it for the bike stuff. I'm going to switch over now to the outdoor dynamic reporting. And we're just starting here with year-to-date growth. In units, we're up for both genders about 2% year-to-date. Again, this is through May compared to the same time period last year. Prices have increased on average, and so our dollars sold is up more than 2%. We're actually up 9% in total dollars. Let's hop into apparel, and we will focus on women's specific business here. So we've got sales up in some categories, down in others. The one that immediately jumps out is outerwear. And this time of year, the first few months of the year, we have to be a little bit careful with outerwear because that can be product that has carried over on markdown from holiday. So one good way to look at this is to drill into margins. So I'll do that. When we look at margin information, we're only looking for the specialty channel. And you can see that margin actually did come down, and it wasn't much to write home about in the first place in the first 5 months of last year. So clearly sales are up, but prices are down, and this represents some clearance of retailers trying to get off of some of that inventory that they have in the stock rooms. All right, let's jump into sportswear. We'll go back to units sold. Year-to-date, relatively flat in women's sportswear business, 1% growth in units. Dollars, we're up 8%, so we've seen about a 6 or 7% average retail price increase in women's sportswear so far this year compared to the same period last year. Jump into tops for a moment here and see what's going on. We've got some really significant growth percentages in dollars in these top categories, the bras, dresses, jackets, and vests, and even long sleeve shirts. And then some of the more summery kind of warm weather products, short sleeve shirts, sleeveless, and sport tops are the ones that are down. And that is most likely a reflection of the fact that we had such an early spring and summer last year, and people were out buying that warmer weather product much earlier than usual. So in general, we have sportswear tops up 8%. And we can take a look at where this purchasing is being done. So sportswear is an important component of outdoor business, certainly. And if we divide it into our channels here, you can see that specialty is actually down 7% in sportswear units. So there's a little bit of migration out of the specialty specific channel into internet and chain stores. Convert that over to dollars sold, and it actually goes positive for specialty thanks to the price increases, but not nearly as much as these other channels, especially internet, which is up 19% in dollars of women's sportswear top sales so far this year. So if we take a look at average retail selling price, we are up 12% at specialty, and there certainly is the possibility that that is driving some of the traffic out of that channel into the others. Internet is up significantly at 11%, but if you look at the average selling price here at $45.67 compared to $51.58 in specialty, there is a significant discrepancy in price there, and that's something that specialty stores need to keep an eye on and make sure that they're not being price shopped and forcing customers out of their particular channel. All right, let's see what's going on with footwear. So we're still looking at women's specific product, and if you forget exactly how we're filtered here, you can look across the top and see that we're now looking at women's, we're looking at footwear, we're looking at average retail selling price, so I'm going to flip that back over to units sold. So year-to-date, footwear has had a bit of a rough time. We're down 4% in units, and we're down about 1% in women's footwear in dollars. Let's see how boots are performing at the subcategory level. They're up 9% in dollars here, and if we drill into boots, hiking boots are up 17%. So again, this is women-specific hiking boots, and we're seeing a significant increase in dollars. Units are up also 15%. So there's something going on here with hiking boots. We've seen some softness in this category the last few years, particularly among women shoppers. And it's heartening and interesting to see this increase starting out so far year to date. Let's keep this in mind because we're going to start to see a pattern develop here with respect to the categories of product that are showing strength so far this year. I'm going to jump into shoes really fast here. No surprise here. We're looking at units. Again, just women's product. Multi-sport shoes are down 35%. Casual shoes continue to grow and be popular, up 15%. That is not enough to counter the drop in multi-sport, so shoes in general are down 8% in units and 9% in dollars. So we really haven't seen anything come in to replace that craze that surrounded the minimalist multi-sport category over the last few years. If we do break down by minimalism, 50% decline so far this year in minimalist women's shoes. The non-minimalist category is growing. It's up 8% so far this year, and obviously it is the vast majority of dollars and growing in the division between minimalism and non-minimalism in women's shoes. And I want to hop into casuals, see what's happening here with price points. So we're focused on women's casual shoes, and there's contraction over $100. There's 15% growth under $100. This is actually better to look at in terms of units. So we've got units up 17%, down 17%, above $100. And if we drill into that below 100 category, you can see that most of the volume is in the $50 to $75 range for casuals, and definitely most of the growth, a 50% increase in units, which is really significant year over year, and then pretty good growth and volume at the $75 to $100 level. And just jump into sandals quickly. Sandals have been down this year. This is most likely related to the weather phenomenon because they were up significantly last year when it was warmer earlier. I want to show you what's going on here with both genders. When you total it all up, we're down about 5%. But let's put this in the historical perspective. Drag in all periods. And this time I want to keep 2013 and just focus in on first quarter business over the last 4 years. And I'll go ahead and switch this over to dollars. So from 2011 to 2012, very significant increase in dollars sold in sandals. That's for all adults, and then if we break that down to just women's, there was about a 33-ish% increase from 11 to 12 first quarter in women's sandals at Outdoor. So this year in the first quarter we came down to just under $11 million. This is a nice looking number when you compare it to sort of the more average normal business back in 2011. And we think that this category certainly has room to grow. All right. And finally, we'll hop into equipment and equipment accessories to see what women's specific product is doing there. Specifically looking at year-to-date dollars. So winter equipment is up 31% year-to-date. Let me get off of first quarter here, actually. We're just looking at quarter one. There we go. So year-to-date through May. Winter equipment up significantly. That's not something that we're going to get too excited about because this is up against a pretty dismal year for winter equipment last year. But let's look at sleeping bags and packs, 25% and 16% increases in women's-specific sleeping bags and backpacks. So you combine this with the hiking boot surge that we saw, and you start to wonder if maybe there's some kind of renewed interest among women in back to nature, hiking, camping, and so on. And the interesting thing is there is some growth in these categories among men, 12% and 6% in sleeping bags and packs, but nowhere near the very big growth that we're seeing in women's products. So this seems to be more of a women's specific phenomenon that's happening so far year to date. And one more thing to look at in equipment accessories, and that is trekking poles. So we're still filtered on men's here. Trekking pole dollars are up 6% so far this year for men. And if we switch that over to a view of women's product, 39% increase in trekking pole dollars. And in units, it's a 37% increase. So prices have essentially stayed the same, but units have just skyrocketed. So again, here's another tie-in to the hiking and camping theme that we seem to be looking at the beginning of a trend here for women's business so far this year. Something to keep an eye on, and this is certainly a topic that we will be exploring most likely more deeply at the OR show, quite possibly in our trend presentation, which is filling up quickly, by the way, and you can visit leisuretrends.com to sign up for Carpe Trendum at the OR show. And as I said, this surge in hiking and camping type product among women will be on display at Carpe Trendum as well as at our booth at the show, which is booth number 76. Okay, so that concludes our look at data in the cubes, and I'll just switch back over to the slides here, and let's move on and just take a look at some of the themes that we saw today. It looks like the first period of rapid growth in women's product is over. It's time for version 2.0. It's going to be more of a challenge to keep growing those categories that appeal to women and to keep women coming into our stores instead of going out of channel. And when I say our stores, I'm including outdoor-specific internet presences as well. What we don't want to see is too much migration out of the outdoor or cycling channels in general. And speaking of outdoor and cycling, that does appear to be where the biggest opportunities are right now for growing women-specific business. Again, year-to-date, backpacking-related items grew significantly, and we will be keeping our eye on this to see if we've got some kind of trend underway among women. And then finally, we just need to redouble our efforts to keep girls at a young age engaged in active sports in fun ways and maintain that interest and enthusiasm into the teen years and beyond. And this is something where we as grown-ups and parents have a lot of responsibility to encourage girls to get out there and hop on a mountain bike or get out on the rock with a rope, preferably, doing those really fun outdoor things with mom and dad. Okay, so that pretty much concludes the presentation so far today. Thank you very much for your time and for attending. I want to say a big thank you to Hillary and the entire OIWC for partnering with us today. We really appreciate that. I'm going to leave this contact information up on the screen while we get to some questions. In case you arrived late, I'll just reiterate that we'll be sending out a link to the webinar in the next day or so. And if anyone would like a copy of the deck, please don't hesitate to shoot me an email here, and I will send you a copy of it. If you would like more information on the OIWC, you've got Hillary's contact information over here. And one last thought about the OR show, please don't forget to visit our booth. That's number 76. And also look for the events that the OIWC will be sponsoring while you are there. All right, so let's move on to some of the questions here and see what we've got. What are some of the product categories that winter equipment includes? Could the 30% increase also be reflective of the backcountry trend? Absolutely. And let me get back over to our outdoor cube here and jump into winter equipment quickly. Take a view of what's going on there. So we are looking here just year to date. So we're not picking up December business in this view, but we're starting with January. Sort of layered in on top of all of the things that have been going on with the economy and the weather is this general trend over time of increased, growing, very healthy business in randonnée and AT. And since this is our outdoor data set, we're not really looking at any downhill information here. So when we see an increase like this in outdoor, it's pretty much all backcountry. And if I jump off of the women's filter here and just go to adult business in general, randonnée AT is up 21.8% so far year to date. That's in units. Let's see what that translates into in dollars, even more because of some price increases. 35% increase year to date. And then we can just see what the year-over-year trend is. So we've got Rondonnée AT here. So 21 to 23 million in that time frame. And then in 2012, we actually came down to about 20.5 million. And again, this is reflective of that almost non-existent winter that we had in the 11 to 12 season. Let's see what else we have here for questions. Can you show detail for women's sportswear growth and sales year to date? Specific product categories, dresses versus pants, etc. Yes, I can. So we will stay in the outdoor information here. Hop into apparel, switch it over to women's and sportswear, and then I'll just take this down to the next level in the hierarchy of categories. And let's get this back to a year-to-date view. So in dollar terms, dresses just continue to crank. 21% growth so far year-to-date in dresses. You've got pants up 12%, so I think that was one of the comparisons that the questioner was asking about. Pretty much everything is up except for these shorter sleeved shirts. And in general, 8% growth. Now, if we switch that, that's dollars. If we switch that over to units, not as much, 1%. So what's really helping the growth here is some year-to-date price increases. Okay. When you say version 2.0, what are some of the early trends that are being seen as a result? Better variety of apparel or better componentry on bikes or other suggestions? So, you know, I think that we're really in sort of the nascent stage of version 2.0 in women's product. We've gotten past the point of figuring out what that needs to be, and you know, there's the cliche of we started at some point probably in the 90s of just adding pink pants and making them in extra small, but not really changing the cut or anything and trying to call that women's, and then figured out that clothing as well as equipment needed to be functionally correct for women's different statures and different centers of gravity and different weight and so on. And so we saw a lot of product really hit the market in huge numbers that was specific to women but also appropriate for women's slightly different way of doing things. What I think we saw in that graph where there was significant growth in share through 2007 and then that leveled off over the last few years is that the novelty of introducing those products has kind of worn off. And so now we're at the point where we need to figure out what version 2.0 is and what we can do, especially given all of this outside channel competition, these brands that are one-off brands with standalone brick-and-mortar operations as well as powerful web presences that are draining some of our women-specific business out of our industries. So I can't say that I have a specific vision of what version 2.0 is necessarily in mind, but I think it's something that we all need to be thinking about, particularly at the design and manufacturer level, and marketing and the whole picture, to figure out what it's going to take to keep pulling women back into our specific industries. All right. Get to a few more questions here. Okay, this is a great question. Can the large increase in women's outdoor equipment be related to an increase in women's specific supply? Do you have any data related to supply versus sales year over year? Yes, we do. We are very proud of the fact that we actually track inventory on hand at specialty stores. So I am just going to filter on specialty only, excuse me, and I believe that the question was specific to equipment. So probably the best way to do this is we'll dive into equipment. We're filtered on women's already, right here. I'm going to just hide this column to avoid cluttering things up. And then I think I'll just pull in, actually let's drill into year to date. So we're looking at first quarter and then second quarter, which is just through May. And I'll set up units sold alongside inventory units. And I think the best way to do this is going to be to look at a percent share of total business. So pardon me for thinking out loud here. It's actually the thinking part of this job is one of the most fun parts of it. Okay, so there we have gender-specific unit information within each product category. And then I'll just switch this to a view of total share, percentage share. So for instance, in the first quarter, women's sleeping bag sales were at 10% of total. Inventory was at 14%. So, you know, you could argue that there was maybe a slight oversupply there, and that drove some additional sales, although I would tend to think the opposite, which is that the demand was there first. Retailers either anticipated it or responded to it and then brought in sufficient supply to meet that demand. If we look at the end of May, we had 14% of all units on hand were women specific, and sales in April and May were at 14%. So there's perfect parity right there. We can hop back to 2012. And that's just sleeping bags. So for packs, kind of a similar story in the first quarter and pretty close numbers here in the second quarter. So let's jump back to 2012 and take a look at the 4 quarters of that year. So let's get into second quarter here. Sleeping bag, women's sales, 12% of all units. Inventory on hand at the end of the quarter was 13%. So that's just about perfect. Third quarter, 12%, 13.5%. So, you know, it's not like we're seeing a huge surge in inventory levels here. I do think that this is more of a demand-driven phenomenon than just a matter of retailers stocking more product. If we look at packs, and I'm going to move on from this if your eyes are glazing over from all these numbers. At the end of the first quarter last year, 18% of all packs were women specific, and in the following quarter, 20% of sales were women specific. So we've got pretty good parity between sales and inventory, and congratulations to those retailers for doing a pretty good job of stocking the appropriate levels of inventory. Okay, so that was a little bit of a complicated view and shows you some of the capabilities that we have here at Leisure Trends in terms of diving into some pretty specific information with respect to inventory. Move on to the next question. Lots of great questions here, and I am apologizing right now for the fact that I'm not going to be able to get to all of them. I'm going to try to hit maybe 2 or 3 more. We'll see if there are any specific questions that Hillary can address with respect to the OIWC too. Okay, there's a request to look at women's bottoms, which we just did. Get that. Okay, can you clarify if these are retail sell-in or sell-out numbers? And I apologize if that was not clear. When we are talking about units sold throughout this data reporting, we're talking about units sold out at retail. And same thing for dollars sold. We're looking at retail dollars collected at the register. So after discounts are applied and so on at retail, the dollars that are collected by retailers at the register. Just browsing more questions here. So this is a good question. For cycling shoes, do you think, I'm sorry, I just clicked off of it. Do you think the reason for such low percentage in women's cycling shoes is that women are not using cycling-specific shoes, or that they're just using men's specific shoes? Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a combination. I think maybe men tend to be a little bit more of an early adopter when it comes to that kind of technical equipment. But given the fact that well over 40% of cyclists are women, I still think we would expect to see more sales in women's specific shoes. And I think that there's plenty of opportunity there for manufacturers to explore the possibilities. Certainly some women are buying men's specific shoes, but that takes us back to the problem of not addressing the specific needs of women in general that are going to allow them to participate fully and enjoy the activities as much as the other half of the population. Here's a question. Can you please remind me of what's in the outdoor segment? So I think that means, how do we define outdoor? If you go to our website, we have some documentation that explains exactly the way we define and segment these various channels. But outdoor is going to be your traditional, true outdoor store, that covers backpacking, hiking, camping, backcountry skiing, not so much downhill skiing, paddle sports. We have a separate track for paddle sports, but these are the kinds of stores that would also be selling paddle sports and that sort of thing. And then casual outdoor sportswear for the apparel component, as well as technical outdoor clothing, 3-layer waterproof breathable garments that sell for $400 to $550 and so on. So it's your real core outdoor store. To mention a shop that pretty much everyone is going to know, if you walk into an REI, that is the type of product that we are tracking through this channel. Okay. I think that is going to wrap it up for today. I was just kind of paging through to see if there was anything that I could throw over to Hillary, and it looks like most of your questions are about the actual data that we were looking at. So once again, I'm just going to say, on behalf of Hillary Harding and the OIWC and myself and all of us here at Leisure Trends Group, thank you very much for attending today. Keep your eyes open for an email that will have a link to the recording, and don't hesitate to contact me by email if you would like to request a copy of the slide deck today. Have a great rest of the week and enjoy your trip to the OR show. Thank you very much.